Now, in 2011, Treasury announced a move towards a twin peak model of financial regulation. The mode suggests changes to the duties of the Financial Services Board, the FSB, in terms of separating oversight of market conduct regulation with actual insurance or financial services regulation. Okay, you don't understand it? Good. That's why we got Jonathan Dixon in studio. He's the Deputy Executive Officer at the FSB. How are you doing? Good to have you on Morning Live.
Morning.
All right, so I'm sure a lot of people looking at me, Twin Peaks Financial, what are you talking about, Leanne?
Yeah.
So let's try and explain this to people. What is this all about?
So in a nutshell, Twin Peaks is really about a rearranging of how financial regulation is going to be done in South Africa. So this is probably the biggest change in, I guess, over 20 years since the Financial Services Board was first set up. We're moving from a model where financial regulation has up until now been organized along industry lines. So you had regulation of pension funds, insurance, banks, and it's moving to a more functional approach, which says there'll be one regulator that looks at financial soundness of entities and another one that looks at market conduct. And at the same time, it's also an opportunity to look at the scope of regulation as well as the approach that we're going to take.
Okay. Why is it important that South Africa adopts something like this?
So we've been talking about it for a long time in terms of trying to learn lessons from internationally about how to best do financial regulation. And I think the conversation really picked up after the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. South Africa came through that well, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't learn lessons. And internationally, globally, there's been big debates on how to improve financial regulation to avoid the kind of crisis that we had. So the focus of Twin Peaks is A, to try and avoid the kind of financial stability problems that we saw in the global crisis, but B, also a much bigger focus on market conduct and protection of consumers.
All right. In terms of the new financial sector regulation bill, was that passed last year in Parliament? Because that was I think the main impetus to get this in motion.
So the financial sector regulation bill that gives effect to Twin Peaks is still going through Parliament.
So it's still going through.
A second draft was issued for public comment in December, with a hope to go back. Comments are closing in the beginning of March. And going back to Parliament around the middle of the year.
Has this widely been welcomed?
Yes, actually it's been widely welcomed by industry as well. I think because there's a realization that there are things that we can do to improve the stability of the system, but also recognizing Twin Peaks is probably quite well suited for South Africa, given that we have quite a concentrated financial sector with lots of banks owning insurers and vice versa. So it makes sense to look at the prudential supervision of them centrally, and that will happen at the South African Reserve Bank, but also a stronger focus on consumer protection. And I think industry understands that's also in their long-term interests as well. Yeah,
well, certainly it's going to have a huge effect on businesses and particularly looking at the South African Reserve Bank. A lot more personnel. I know that last year that was the huge focus of recruiting more and more people to handle this, because it's a big change. In terms of business though, what is going to change? How are businesses going to have to adapt the way of doing financials after this?
So I think from a prudential regulation side, looking at the financial soundness that the SARB will do, the big change there is that will now happen at a group level. So instead of the old way of one regulator looking at the insurers in the group, another one looking at the banks, that will now happen on a conglomerate, on a consolidated basis. Okay. From a market conduct, consumer protection side, our whole approach to regulation and supervision is changing. This concept of treating customers fairly is the banner under which the new approach is being rolled out, and that says firms themselves must look at their culture, look at the way they're treating their customers, and proactively make changes to improve that.
All right. And next year, this is when it should come into effect?
Yeah, it's going through Parliament this year with any luck, become effective early next year.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in and
Thanks.
talking to us here on the
Thanks,
programme about this. Jonathan Dixon is the Deputy Executive Officer at the Financial Services Board here in South Africa. Thank you so much.
Thanks.